Josh, thank you for being on the program. Give me the precedent or historical comp to the surprise that Indiana is this year.
Man, oh man, I guess you'd have to go to college basketball, Dan, to find the most ready parallel for it. I'm just not sure it really happens in college football. And I also want to remind people like last year was the flash. You know, if you were to have what we historically in sports would call a flash in the pan, last year would have been that, right? You've got a guy who takes over a bottom dwelling Big Ten program. Indiana exists in the Big Ten so that Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, et cetera, can rack up wins. He takes over that job. He imports his James Madison roster. James Madison makes the playoff the next year, mind you. Indiana makes the playoff and then gets better the year after that and makes the playoff and is the number one overall seed. I don't know what the parallel is for it. I will tell you sort of the whole side lane of all this has been how bad it makes other coaches look. Because every other coach is out there begging for patience and they're trying to sell their booster class and their administrative class that it takes 2, 3 years minimum. And that used to work. And now all of that's burned up because your fan base and your donor base and your AD even knocks on your door and says, hey, you've got infinitely more resources, at least we thought, than Cignetti has at Indiana. Why has he been able to do it? And they really have no answer.
I've been arguing that Vanderbilt had its best season ever, Missouri best season ever, Texas Tech best season ever, Indiana best season ever. Is there anyone else, and is this just a product of what you're talking about? You can just get a coach now, and a coach and quarterback can go from North Texas to Oklahoma State, and you can fix your program by just doing it that quickly.
I think you can. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Now, I also think it is fraught with vulnerability because you could also try it and crash and burn, or you could have what's happened at Florida State, where you go and you do it one time. You portal your way to success one time, and it sort of crystallizes this belief that you can just do that every year. And really, that's not anyone's aim, Dan. That's not even Cignetti's aim at Indiana. That's not Clark's aim. I'm in Nashville, down the road at Vanderbilt. That's not their aim. Their aim is really to build through high school recruiting. It's just they realized, what are we doing? We're really building through high school recruiting just so the big boys can come in 2 years from now when they've developed on our dime and they portal out. So they've got to lean a little more heavy in the portal than that. But I also think there's this other thing happening. So as the portal, as NIL is elevating the level that those programs can operate at, I would also ask you, look around the country today versus a decade ago. Tell me where the dominant line of scrimmage play is. Nobody, your Alabamas, your Texases, Georgia, nobody has dominant offensive line play anymore. And that used to be the catch-all. That used to be what completely yanked your lifeline out of the wall, was their ability, the big boys' ability to just lean and lean and lean. And football's a game where you get to put your hands on other people. And so at a certain point, you're powerless because it's not college basketball. No one really possesses that. They have it in spurts. Teams have it in spurts, but no one wire to wire possesses that. Even among the playoff teams right now, who's dominant on the offensive and defensive lines? The way Bama would have been a decade ago, the way Georgia was even 5 years ago. So I think those two things happening at the same time have opened the door for some things that we used to say could never happen in college football.
How much would you argue with me if I said Texas Tech should be favored to win the championship?
I'd argue a little bit. I've watched them a couple of times really, really up close. And the only thing that I would kind of push back on is I don't know that they would have the quarterback play to get them over the top. Like, I think eventually quarterbacks have to win games. You guys are we're all gonna watch Miami and A&M Saturday, for example. Those are two really good pass rushes. Those are two teams that can shut the other team's run game down. And it eventually just comes down to, can Carson Beck really have a few series that he puts together where he wins a game? Can Marcel Reed do that? Well, I would ask the same question at Texas Tech. And I do think that they have a defensive side of the ball. It's just littered with Sunday talent, littered with SEC Big Ten talent. Can they win 3 of them? Can they string together 3 of them? And do I think that they could consistently do that enough to be considered the favorite? That's where I'd push back a little bit, because even though everyone's fallible at this point, I think I trust other quarterback situations more than theirs.
Hey, Josh, big fan. Go Freights. The Michigan job. You've been ahead of this story, and your most recent podcast shed a lot of light on it. How quickly do you think that we actually see this job filled? Because there's a lot of questions to be asked in Michigan and its leadership. If I'm a head coach, am I signing with a program that may be under scrutiny? Will I still have that same AD that hired me?
Yeah, look, it's really interesting how that search is going to happen, actually. We just saw a Penn State search where, for better or for worse, the athletic director ran point on it. I don't know that that's the way the Michigan search is operating, but I also don't know what the future of Ward Manuel is there. In fact, they may just be putting that off until they hire the head coach. That is a very, very strange situation, I will grant you, to jump into. The counterpoint to that is, a little birdie flew in my ear last night and told me, do you realize since we fired Ward, we've actually had an uptick in our NIL contributions? Reading between the lines, that tells me there were a lot of deep-pocketed people up there that were not very happy just with the general direction, just with the general existence of the program with Sharon. I think Sharon, if you zoom it out to 50,000 feet, was always kind of looked at by a lot of people up there as a bridge coach. We're gonna put you in place at the tail end of the Harbaugh stuff, right in the middle of the NCAA stuff. We don't know what's going to be on the other side of this bridge, and it's really foggy. Well, the fog lifted. The worst case scenario didn't happen, and then you're just stuck with a coach that truthfully was bottom quarter to bottom half of the Big Ten from a caliber standpoint, and then you get this mess dropped in your lap. So it ends the way it ends. I think they look at it and say, it really doesn't matter which direction we go, we're going to upgrade. Whether that's true or not, that's what they believe. I think they're really ready to spend, and I think a lot of candidates are going to be sold on that idea. It's not false, by the way. I mean, it's like an untapped oil field up there from an NIL donor perspective, and it's the Michigan job. And, if you're going after Kalen DeBoer, yes, I always thought it was going to be really hard to pull him away from Alabama. I still feel that. I know they won't give up until they actually get him looking them in the eyes and saying no. Like a Twitter statement's not going to do for them, and I get that. I don't think they're getting DeBoer. But if you go after a Kenny Dillingham, for example, if you go after a Jed Fish, those guys probably, given their current situation versus what they could inherit at Michigan, could be willing to say, you know what? I'll assume a little bit of that risk because of the reward that I think I could bring us, and it could bring me there. So to answer the first part of the question, I think it's going to go on a little bit because I really do think they insist on getting a firm no from Kalen DeBoer. That could be as early as Friday night or Saturday of this week. Or if they just keep winning, it could be as late as into the new year. And they got to adjust their timeline accordingly, probably, if that happens. But I do think once they get the no, and I do think it'll be a no from Kalen, you move on to like a Kenny Dillingham or a Jed Fish. I think that's when you start to really see rubber meet road there, because I don't know that either of those guys are able to turn down the full force of what the Michigan offer would be.
I'd take that job in a second if I were DeBoer. Get out from under all the Saban stuff and just start over in a place with happier.
Same pressure, no?
Yeah, but you're not following the guy.
I mean,
you're following the guy after the guy.
I don't think it is the same pressure, actually. And it's a place where you're new on hope. You're not stained. But put this on the poll, please, Juju, at Le Batard Show. Is Josh too young to have little birdies flying in his ear? And look up for me why it is that it is a little birdie that flies into someone's ear with information. Is it carrier pigeon related?
Josh, you mentioned a couple of months ago that you believe that there is a big job that is going to open up because something is happening. Were you talking about the Michigan job?
Yes, I was talking about the Michigan job. I believed that job was going to open up because I thought it had two possibilities. The first was just competitively. I believe I said it after they had lost the Oklahoma game. So you still knew that you had the trip to USC coming up. They lost that one. And you had the Ohio State game coming up. If they lost one other game along the lines, I thought they could have fired Sharon just because competitively they didn't think that he was meeting the standard. But that was also armed with the knowledge that there was this other stuff going on in the background. Now, it would be a total lie if I told you, man, hey, I knew Michigan had cause to fire him right then and there. They didn't even know they had full cause to fire him until last week. So I just thought if they're looking for a reason, maybe they're given a reason on the field. But all I was doing at that point was echoing what a lot of people in the business were saying, and that was, hey, with the Penn State job coming open, and Florida just fired Napier, and LSU made a move. As all that hurricane started to swirl, I kept on getting told, hey, the Michigan job may come open. The Michigan job's probably going to come open. And at that point, if you remember, no one was considering that as a possibility. Michigan was ranked. They were fine. They had come out of the NCAA scandal stuff. So that was really not on the radar. And I was just thinking to myself, man, with all these other big jobs opening up, if Michigan gets thrown into the fold here, what is that about to do to the hiring cycle? And it did get thrown into the fold just after the other jobs already got taken.